When I first walked down to the little pond behind the house, I thought about ducks and mornings, not so that's the part that still smarts. Even now, when everything has settled and the water is quiet again. My name is Eli Turner, and that pond was the thing I bought the land for. A crooked dock, cattails, a place where the dog could chase sunbeams, and I could fool myself into thinking time slowed down. 3 months later, the pond had a name, Maple Hollow Lake, and a woman in a blazer was trying. You want the short version? Somebody tried to steal my pond. The long version. Well, you sit back a minute and I'll start from the beginning, because it's not the kind of thing that fits into 30 seconds. And the way it unravels is the thing you don't expect. People think power is loud and obvious, but it starts as a polite question, a clipboard, a smile. Act 1. I paid for the land. I paid the taxes. I signed every dotted line, plain paper, county clerk, all the way. The property marker is still in the ground where it always was. Maple Hollow sits on the edge of Ridgewater Estates, a neighborhood that likes its front lawns ironed and its meetings on Tuesdays. The association calls itself Willow Ridge, and at the top of its pyramid was Marla Hayes. Polished teeth, perfectly timed outrage, a way of leaning that made you feel like you were interrupting someone's rehearsal. Our first conversation was almost laughable. She showed up at my mailbox with a clipboard, "We're so glad to welcome a new neighbor," and handed me a printed map. On it, my pond was shaded for community access. I laughed. She didn't. "We maintain all bodies of water for the community," she said. "It benefits everyone." I pointed to the deed, the language, the survey. She smiled and said, "Sometimes paperwork doesn't reflect reality." That was the moment to get angry. I suppose when sentences shift like sand and you realize the game being played is to rewrite small things until they become big. They started small. A wooden "Welcome to Willow Ridge" sign planted by the lane. A couple of benches that weren't there the week before, a glossy flyer pinned to the mailbox about volunteer cleanup at the lake. Neighbors showed up with folding chairs. That's the baffling half of it, because at first it looked like community. Marla cooed and laughed, and people clapped her on the back. I felt like I'd watched a stranger put a sweater on my dog and then invite everyone to admire how cute he looked, polite, awkward, and suddenly everyone loved the sweater. Act 2. Escalation doesn't always look like escalation. It crept in. A mailing here, a Facebook post there. The association posted photos of a dock that wasn't mine, people tagging the wrong GPS coordinates as if the map itself could be redrawn by the clicks of a share button. I hired a surveyor. The surveyor sent me clear lines and an invoice. I sent polite emails. She sent polished notices that began, "Per community rights," and ended with, "We hope to resolve this amicably." Amicably, in Marla speak, meant a PR-friendly gentle shove. The town lunch was the first time things publicly turned. Marla organized a pond day, complete with a flyer and a folding band stretched out on someone else's grass. She gave a small speech about stewardship and community, and when I stood up, the room narrowed. "Eli," she said, like a smile that had teeth, "maybe it's time to be a team player." I said something I shouldn't have, something blunt and tired, and then she said something sharper, and the room hummed like glass. People picked sides the way they picked teams at high school. Some because they'd always trusted Marla, some because they liked the idea of a place they could picnic. Everyone wanted to believe in a neat story where people share, so the messy facts were ignored or retold with a prettier sentence. Then came the car. Not a planned stunt. Some things are just awful luck wrapped in ego. Marla wanted a photo op, apparently. Drive down the slope in a rented car for a staged arrival, step out in a dress, pose near the lake. You can see the headline she imagined, the glossy social feed. She misjudged the bank. The car slid, the nose dipped into the mud, and for the briefest second the mirror world of the pond swallowed chrome and vanity. People gasped. Somebody laughed. The tow truck made a better photo than Marla hoped it would. For a moment, the whole power play looked ridiculous and small, and that humbling didn't sit well with her. After that, things accelerated. Marla's flyers grew angrier, letters about unauthorized private improvements and community liability. She hired contractors who showed up at dawn to plant stones along the bank to stabilize the shoreline. Contractors don't ask questions when a check is cut. That's how scaffolding gets built around a falsehood. I called the county. The county sent a letter. The county also sent a couple of people who have seen their share of neighbor arguments and who do not get impressed by polished phrases. But here's the beat that matters. It wasn't only paperwork that broke her. It was the neighbors. Deputies came before dawn, their boots scuffed and uncomplicated. They read orders cease and desist, stop work, don't alter the land. There was a short, ugly scene where Marla argued like a woman cornered, all teeth and lipstick. And then there were signatures on papers, and the world tilted back into bureaucratic lines. When the board met, there was a rumbling under the polite phrases. You could see it told alliances fraying, people not liking to be lied to even when it's wrapped in a ribbon. The HOA suspended Marla. The contractors were paid off and left. I didn't dance on any stage. I watered my garden and let the days prove what deeds already had. The county confirmed the property boundaries. The pond remained my pond, and the bench was moved quietly to where it belonged. But endings that feel clean are rarely satisfying for viewers, so let's not pretend the moral is tidy. Marla's removal didn't heal everything. There were fractures in the neighborhood that would take seasons to mend. There were neighbors who still thought she was right, who saw her as someone who cared about public good and blamed me for being difficult. The town's grapevine got louder, and I found myself answering the same questions at grocery lines and the hardware store. People love to take a side, and once they do, they tend to keep talking even if the facts change. What I learned is a small, stubborn thing. Ownership isn't only about signing a deed, it's about the story you tell and the proof you keep. Patience mattered, paperwork mattered, but so did witness accounts and the quieter ethics of neighbors who remembered seeing a woman in a blazer who loved how things looked more than how they actually were. I also learned that power shows up soft first. It asks politely, then escalates. If you miss the first knock, the third one is a battering ram. So now when I look at the water, I see more than reflected trees. I see the meetings, the attempts, the late-night lights, and the deputies' boots. I think about how easily a community can be edited, how quickly a map becomes a story, and how stories can be corrected if enough people remember the maps. The pond is calmer than it was during that summer. Geese pick at the edges, my dog still chases sunbeams, and the dock sits where it always did. If you've ever had a neighbor turn community into a sword, or seen a small claim grow into a public showdown, drop it in the comments. Tell me what you think mattered most: paperwork, witnesses, or the stubbornness to stand your ground. If you've been on the other side, if you've watched a leader go too far, I'd like to hear that too. Hit subscribe if you want more stories about small places and big egos, and share this with someone who loves a messy, human showdown. Justice isn't always cinematic, but sometimes it arrives because enough people remember the truth and say it out loud.